Quilters Newsletter TV, the Quilters community, is brought to you by Husqvarna Viking, keeping the world sewing for over 140 years. Hi, and welcome to Quilters Newsletter TV, the Quilters community. I'm Mary Kate Karr-Petras, and I am back with our guest, Erin Russek. Erin's been with us before. Welcome back.
Thank you for having me.
And you're here today to talk about applique, hand applique, for which you're very well known. You've been designing quilts for years, right? And
yes, it seems to be all I do.
Design patterns, and this is your signature look, this quilt that we have here on the table in front of us. Very colorful, very bright, and again, all done by hand, turned edge by hand.
Right. So yeah, I don't like to actually turn as I stitch. I like to prepare everything before I go. And when I say everything, I really mean everything.
Okay.
So these two quilts that I brought are small, and they are done exactly this way. So this is my quilt, Miss Hannah, and that was just a fun one that I did. And it's when I first really learned that you can actually make all your shapes, make all your stems, glue it all down, and then sew. And so that really saved a lot of time and saves a lot of stress.
It saves, okay.
Yeah, because you don't have to worry about fussing about getting things sewn and then putting other things on top of it. I just do the whole thing all at once.
Okay.
This is another quilt that I did for some videos, and it's called Fancy Flowers. And same way, I did everything. I made every shape. I pasted it down, and then I started stitching afterwards. So it's really actually quite easy, and it makes stitching really pleasant, and I find making all the shapes beforehand really pleasant too.
Okay.
So here is a sneak peek into my process a little bit. So these blocks, I'm gonna spread them out a little, are for a quilt I'm working on now, and I have like 5 of them here. None of these, I use embroidery for the stems on these because they're small. They're only 9-inch blocks.
Okay.
And so I thought embroidery made a nicer stem. But none of these have actually been stitched. They're all, I've starched and pressed all these shapes into place, into their size, and then I just glued them down. And so they're ready to stitch. So when I'm ready to stitch, I just get it out, I get the thread, and I start stitching. And I don't have to fuss with anything. I don't have to realign anything. I can just enjoy stitching it.
And they don't pop off?
No.
What kind of glue do you use?
I use Roxanne's glue baste, and
Okay.
I really like it. I have some here, and I'm going to show you how I put things on in a few minutes.
Okay, great.
Yeah, so that's one of my favorite products.
Because that would be my concern, is that things would pop off over time. But then, how long does it take you to finish a block like this, once you've got everything in position?
You know, an hour or two, you know, I'm kind of fast.
You are fast!
I'm kind of fast, but this technique, it does make it a lot faster, trust me. So people who think they're not fast at stitching are.
Okay.
They just, because they're not having to fuss with aligning stuff up and turning things under, it does go a lot faster.
Right. Okay, great.
So that's a time saver, and everybody needs to know it. So and I have to tell you that I have some quilt blocks that I glued with Roxanne glue baste years ago, and the things are still stuck.
Interesting.
So it doesn't degrade. And
it's water soluble.
Yes.
It washes out if you need to wash it out.
Right.
Great.
So if you don't like where you put your daisy, you can just pull it off and put it somewhere else, and when you wash your quilt, it will go away.
Excellent.
So for today's little episode, I'm going to show how this block is finished. I did it the same way. I made all my shapes, I glued them down, and I stitched them. And I'm going to demonstrate how I do my stitching, and I'm going to show a little bit how I do the gluing.
Okay.
So that's the finished block. And I'm going to need my glasses at this point because I'm needing those these days. But as you can see, none of these are sewn down, none of these leaves are sewn down, they're just glued. And I did actually stitch the stem down just because it's a little, I don't usually do that first, but for ease of showing you what's going on, that one is glued. But when I'm making one of those other blocks, I wouldn't even stitch the stem down before I put the flowers on. I just glue it all, stitch it all. And here I've pre-made my flower, so I've made all the shapes, I've glued them together, so it's kind of, you know, you can see it. And then
there's no stitching in that yet.
There's not any stitching in that yet. And then to actually put it on the quilt, I'll line it up. Now, if I had if I was doing something really precise like those other blocks, I would put the pattern underneath. And for a light background, you can usually see the pattern lines, and you can line up your flowers just fine. If you're using a dark background, then you might need a light box.
Okay.
But I get it so I can see the pattern through the fabric, and then I just glue everything down exactly like it's on the pattern. So it's really easy. I'm going to take my little thing of glue baste. I love this one because it's really portable. And so I'm just going to peel back and dab a little glue on that petal, and just keep doing that.
So just around the outside edges.
Right. Sometimes if it's a really elaborate shape, I'll glue a little in the center, like the vases on those other blocks I was showing you. So it's just really that easy.
How long does this take to get tacky or to dry?
It dries almost instantly. You'll be ready to, it's ready to sew now.
Okay.
So you don't have to wait around. And there you go. So that's all ready to stitch. So it's really that easy.
Okay.
Now for actually stitching, I'm going to talk a little bit about things. For stitching, I have a couple of things that I really like to do. For demonstrating this stitch, I'm going to be using black thread so you can see my stitches. But I would never do that in a real quilt because my stitches, you know, I don't want them to be seen. I want them to be truly invisible. So I try to match my thread to my applique pieces, not the background, to my pieces. And a couple of the things I do, I use, this is Thread Heaven, and it's a thread conditioner. So if you have a thread and you want to make sure it doesn't tangle too much, you can just run it through this Thread Heaven, and that will make it less tangly.
It's something that hand quilters use as well. If you don't have the coated hand quilting thread, you can use something like this.
Right, right. I really like it, and it keeps the twisting, because sometimes your thread will twist.
Yeah.
Another thing I really like are these thimble pads. I don't like the feeling of a thimble on my finger. My finger gets sweaty, and it's uncomfortable, and I lose sensation, and I really do need to feel what I'm doing. So I like these. They're thimble pads, and you just this little thing of leather, and you just stick it on your finger. And the adhesive will wear off eventually, and then you have to get another one. So they sell them in like packs of 12, and they're really, really handy. So so I'm all ready.
You have thread over there.
Yeah.
Make it a break for it.
I'm ready to stitch.
Oh, let's talk about the weight of the thread that you used and the fiber content.
Well, I always use cotton thread. Some people like silk. I find silk is a little too unwieldy. It's too active for me. This is a Mettler 60 weight thread, and that's pretty thin. And this is a Arafil 50 weight thread, and it's also pretty thin because of the manufacturing process. So I like both those threads a lot.
Okay.
I wouldn't, the thinner the better, but silk is just a little too thin and a little too active. It twists around a lot.
Okay.
So I don't like to use it. And it's also very, it can rip your fabrics. Silk is a very strong thread, and if you really pull your stitches tight, you can actually rip your fabric.
Okay.
So I don't want to do that.
No.
So after all this work.
Right.
So anyway, so I'm going to start a leaf just how I would when I'm stitching it. And I'm going to show you with the black thread how I do that. So I actually start from the front, and because the glue it's not going all the way around the leaf, there are places where you can kind of snake your needle in and snake your thread in, and you can come out right on that folded edge of your shape. So that's what I'm doing, and I never start right at a point either, because I think you want to start in a gently curving area of your applique shape. And once I start that, I kind of pull it so the knot's all in there, and it's not, you can't see it on the back at all. So I kind of like that, because sometimes if your threads are showing on the back, it's ugly, and it'll show on the front if you're using a really sheer background fabric. So anyway, so I'm ready to take my first stitch, And I just go right from where I came out the turned edge into the background. I go just a teeny bit over, and then I pop out the folded edge. And then I pull, and you don't want to pull too tight. You don't want to see puckers going along the edge of your shape. That's kind of ugly, so I try not to do that. But you have to pull tight enough that you don't have a big, nest of threads on the back.
Right.
And then I just keep doing that. I keep going straight out from where I took my last stitch, underneath the background and out on the fold edge. So you just keep doing that. And as you get better at it, you can get your stitches, just like hand quilting, you can get your stitches closer together.
What's the farthest apart you like your stitches to be?
I like to shoot for 10 to 12 stitches per inch.
Okay.
That's, right now, I'm about 1/8 of an inch, so that's like 8 stitches per inch. That's a little large for me. If you have this is a gentle curve, so you can probably pull that off. But when you're doing really small, intricate shapes, the smaller the stitch is going to only work in your favor.
And even though you're using contrasting thread, from where my vantage point, it still is pretty. Those stitches are really nice and tiny.
Well, thanks.
Let's see what it looks like when you're actually using a blending, a matching thread, so people can see how much they can't see those stitches.
Okay, well, I'm ready for that. One other thing that I find really, somebody told me about that I think is a useful thing for learning your stitches is most people's sewing machines, you can set it to stitch a certain number of stitches per inch. You can play with it, mark an inch on a piece of fabric, stitch. If it's 10 to 12 stitches, that's kind of a nice guide. And so if you really want to try to perfect that, just make a little guide for yourself, and then you can use that to see how you're doing. It's a good, like hand quilting. Yeah. It's kind of the same sort of thing. So, so here I've matched my green to my green leaves. Here's pink. I would match that, and then the yellow I would match to that little yellow circle. So I have a wide variety of colors. I consider it's like paint to me. Yeah. And so I need to have a lot. I told my husband that I need to have every color. So, and he was okay with it.
Get used to it.
So anyway, so here's the same stitch with thread that matches, and you can see that if you do a good job matching, you won't hardly be able to see your stitches at all. And actually I'm coming up on this point, so I'll kind of show you what I do with a point. When I get to a point, I kind of tug it a little. I tug it out, and then I kind of take a couple of stitches there, because it's going to be a weak link in your quilt. And so I do a couple of stitches in the point just to make sure it's really secure. And then just like before, you just do it, just go right down the other edge. It's very relaxing. Like I love to listen to audiobooks, and I can just really, it's a very relaxing part of my day to do this.
And the thing about handwork is it's so easy to demonstrate the stitch. I mean, that was it. There's not much more to say about it.
Right.
It's just the practice. It's just putting in the time. And it doesn't take too long to start getting really nice results.
Right, and actually, because I'm not fussing with trying to turn my fabrics under while I'm sewing, I can just stitch. And so that helped my stitch get better. And then I like this nice clean edge. I mean, I design all my applique shapes with this in mind, so I can always have this nice clean edge to stitch. So it's, and I enjoy making the shapes too. That's its own very relaxing process. But this is, this way it's not a stressful experience at all.
Not at all.
So very relaxing.
Beautiful. Well, your work is beautiful as always, and thank you so much for sharing with us your technique. Again, it's something that's hard to see in photos, hard to see in a book, hard to see in a magazine.
Yeah.
You really need to see it in action.
Right.
So.
When I was learning this, I took a class, and I kept having the teacher come and just watch me make the stitches so that I would know that I was doing it right. And I think it really is something that you need to actually see, but it's actually way easier than people think it is.
I agree. I agree.
Very much so.
Well, we hope you'll give it a try. Thank you so much for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you next time. Bye-bye.
Quilters Newsletter TV, the Quilters community, is brought to you by Husqvarna Viking, keeping the world sewing for over 140 years.